Hi guys, it's me, Down Under PaleoCon. Sorry for the extremely late upload. I was actually meant to upload last week, except my computer crashed halfway through making the video. So, yeah. So you may notice that I don't really have a proper setup at the moment. That's just temporary for this time being. And you may also notice that there isn't gameplay in this video. That's because of two reasons. A, I'm currently practicing my OBS stream recording thing, and with that, I am going to be recording off my screen, so, killing two birds with one stone. And also, the reason I am practicing my screen recording is because if you've subscribed to my other channel, my gaming channel, you'll know that I'm having a problem with getting gaming. But all you need to know is that I'm currently working to solve said issue. But with all of that out of the way, as you can see, I am currently on the traditional political compass. Back when I did the Sapley political compass, I said that I'd prefer the Sapley political compass over this one because I feel like this one isn't as accurate. And that is still an opinion that I hold, but I decided to take this political compass test anyway. It is, after all, the original one. And I may or may not redo the Sapley political compass, because a few amount of my opinions have changed since then. But alas, let's begin the original political compass. Alright, the first questions are just how you see the country and the world. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I disagree that it is inevitable, but if it was, then yes, I would agree with that sentiment. And currently that is not the case, so yeah, which is why I'm against economic globalization. Because, you see, I find it difficult to believe that economic globalization can serve humanity. But if it was inevitable, but there was also a way that it could be, then yes, I would choose that one. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong, of course. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Strongly disagree. If anything, that's more reason to be proud of it. That was the country you grew up in. That was the source of your national identity, your home, everything. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Strongly disagree. Race is literally just different degrees of melanin in your skin. If the question was cultures, then yes, I do believe cultures are superior to others because then again, that's a subjective thing because different cultures have different subjective views. But I do agree that some views are inherently more moral than others. But that's irrelevant. This is about race, and when it comes to race, no, I can't agree with this. Race is, like I said, just different degrees of melanin in your skin. There's nothing more to it than that. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. It depends, but mostly disagree. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Strongly agree because I don't believe in international law. It shouldn't exist. The United Nations should not exist. And that's a subject I may make a video on sometime. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Disagree. I don't like it per se, but it's not that bad of a thing. It's definitely not that much of a thing to worry about. And not to mention, the combination between information and entertainment is nothing new. That has been a thing since ancient Egypt. Okay, now economic questions. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. No, I don't think so. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of undecided on this one, but currently I'm leaning more towards disagree. I should probably read up on this question because currently I'm undecided on it. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Yes, of course. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. No, not at all. The freer the market, the freer the people. No. I think it goes both ways and works like this. If you're either too regulatory, if there's either too much regulation or it's too free, then each extreme leads to less freedom for the individual, whereas more is more so in the middle, a mixed economy. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. No, I do not see the problem with that. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Again, I don't see the problem with that. I do not see a problem with private property rights, including land. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Yeah, I can agree with that sentiment. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Yes, definitely. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. No, not at all. A company has many responsibilities when it comes to manufacturing, employment. I can go over so many. Companies have many goals. Sure, this should be the main goal, this should be the number one goal, but it's definitely not the only one. The rich are too highly taxed. Yes, definitely they are. Unless we're talking about like the rich, like the 1% rich, because I mean through loopholes they don't pay anything. But rich in general, if we're just talking about different margins of income taxes, then yes, they do pay too much. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of Medicare. Yeah, I can agree. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Well, that depends on what you mean by mislead. If we're talking about fraud, then yes. But overall, yes, I can say I agree with that. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Yes, definitely. This is what I said before. Both a market that is too free or has too much regulations can decrease the individual freedom. That's why we have to come to a center when it comes to economics. Now we're looking at social issues. Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Yes, definitely. Definitely. All authority should be questioned. Yes. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I don't agree with that statement in its literal sense, but with its general sense that, we should be able to make people pay back for their crimes, then yes, I agree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I don't see how this is a social issue. I'd say this is more of an economic one. But yes, I agree, they should. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Strongly disagree. Because if students are then allowed to not go to school, then we are going to grow up with people that do not have the necessary credentials to get good jobs and to contribute to the economy. Making school attendance voluntary will just create a bunch of burdens to society. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Again, this is a bit of a broad question. This is why I don't like this political compass that much, because its questions are very, very broad and vague. And it means by what we mean by sorts of people. If we're talking about races, if this question is asking if we support white nationalism, then of course I'm going to disagree with that. But if it's talking about cultural nationalism and nativism, then I strongly agree with that. And if we're talking about religion, which itself is also cultural, then yes, I would once again agree. But this is, again, why I just don't like this political compass. It's just way too vague. But generally, yes, I agree with that statement. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Yes, of course. It is natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Yeah, I suppose. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. And this is one of the opinions of mine that I've changed, that I've stated before. Before, in both the Sapley video, as well as another video, I think the Royalist one, I said that I actually believe in legalizing marijuana, which is a pretty unpopular opinion amongst the paleocon community, but a popular opinion with everyone else. But recently, I realized that if I support legalizing marijuana, then that just defeats the entire purpose of being a paleoconservative. And because of that, I am against the legalization of marijuana. And not to mention, marijuana is not the safe drug that people make it out to be. Sure, people haven't died from drug addictions from marijuana itself, but they have died from third-party factors that have been caused by marijuana. For example, hundreds of deaths in car accidents can be linked to marijuana. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Yes, of course, that's its only purpose. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be able to reproduce. Disagree, but the reason I'm not putting it in strongly disagree is because I can understand why people may agree with that idea, but personally, I just don't like the idea of restricting people's of that right. And not to mention, this is once again another very broad and vague question, like what disabilities are we talking about here? The most important thing for children is to learn to accept discipline. Yes, definitely. The lack of that is the root of many problems in modern day society. There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. Strongly disagree. I don't I refuse to call the Aztecs, who were literally cutting people's hearts out while they were still alive, a mere different culture. Those who are able to work, yet refuse the opportunity, should not expect society's support. Yes, of course. When you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Yeah, I guess. I'm not quite sure what that question is asking, but yeah, I suppose I agree with that. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated with their new country. Strongly agree. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Again, I don't know why this is with the social issues. I'd say this is another economic question, but disagree, not necessarily. No broadcasting. Actually, no, I'm going to put that as agree. No broadcasting institution, however independent of its content, should receive public funding. Yes, I agree, but once again, that's an economic question. I don't know why it's with social issues. Questions about wider society. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Yes, I agree they are. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Yes, I agree with that. In the Sapley political compass, I said that that was a disadvantage, but recently, when I've engaged in more political dialect and conversations, I realized that this thing here, this thing is just bureaucracy and just gets in the way of change and good things. By the way, if you're curious as to what political system I follow, I consider myself a semi-constitutional monarchist. It's like constitutional monarchism, except the monarch has more power than the parliamentary government, yet is still limited by the constitution. So somewhat of the middle ground between constitutional monarchy and absolute monarchy. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Agree, but I still wouldn't like the government looking at my stuff. Another thing about this, although I said that I still wouldn't like the government to look at my stuff, it's not something that I would be that worried about. It's not something that concerns me that much, it's just, not preferable. So that's why it's on the agree side. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Yes, definitely. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Yes, definitely. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Strongly disagree, and I'll prove it to you guys. The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting and sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty and emotional power. The key words here are human creative skill and imagination and emotional power. By definition, art is supposed to represent something. So yes, of course, this is not art. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Strongly agree, because there is data to prove that rehabilitation doesn't work, and that most criminals that are attempted to be rehabilitated do relapse with their crimes, especially drug offenses, which is why I'm against decriminalizing drugs. It's a waste of time to rehabilitate some criminals. Strongly agree. For example, pedophiles can't be rehabilitated. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Strongly disagree. You see, most paleocons, including myself, follow the American school of economics, which is pretty much economic nationalism and protectionism. And because of that, most of us reject the idea of class struggle and instead believe in the idea of harmony and interest, which pretty much believes that the best thing for the economy is for the classes to cooperate. Which is why I disagree with this, because all classes and all people in all roles can contribute to make the economy greater. So no one is more important than someone else. Mothers have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Yes, strongly agree. I believe in traditional family values. I know I'm going to get cancelled for that answer, and that I'm going to be hated by whoever finds this, but I don't care. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Yes. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Nope, it's a sign of weakness. Okay, religious questions. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. You cannot be moral without being religious. Okay, this time I'm going to answer agree, because without religion, you don't really have a basis of morality. Last time I answered that you do have some basic moral values, but even atheists, even their moral values do originate from religion, even though they'll deny that. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Strongly agree, but in a realistic society, I do believe you need both to an extent. But this is definitely the more ideal one. Some people are naturally unlucky. Yes, some are. Usually it's due to their own faults and mistakes, but sometimes people are just unlucky. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Yes, of course. I mean, I don't have a kid, but when I do, they will go to a private Catholic school. This is non-negotiable. Finally, on page 6, out of 6, we're going to have a look at 6. Sex outside of marriage is immoral. Yes, definitely. I feel like this could also be a religious question, but I mean, this page also makes sense. Same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Agree, granted they pass the same credentials as a heterosexual couple adopting. That thing, depicting consenting adults, should be legal for the adult population. No. 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 What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Agree mostly, but you don't know what they're doing in there. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I'm going to put in slightly disagree, because you can have natural homosexual tendencies. Now, let's see where we stand. This obviously has some bias. They literally put Thatcher and Hitler in the same quadrant. I mean, they are both alt-right, but I mean, that's the only quadrant that has both of them there. I'm sorry, I just can't help that this was made by a liberal or leftist that was trying to compare those two. But alas, here is the political compass. So as we can see, I am halfway authoritarian and center-right. I'm kind of economically center, but slightly right-leaning. I'm actually surprised. I was actually expecting to be more, here, a bit more to the left. But here's another complaint about this political compass, and this isn't necessarily the test, this is just the political compass itself. It doesn't have a progressive conservative scale like the Sapley one did when it came to social issues. Instead, it was just included in the authoritarian and libertarian scale, which kind of makes sense in some regard, but doesn't necessarily. Like the questions about religion, you can be a religious libertarian. And if you're like a paleo-libertarian or a Hoppian, for example, you can be socially conservative without necessarily believing it should be in legislation. But alas, that is the political compass. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.